Hello, everyone. This is OPS, Olympic Peninsula Spotlight. I'm your host, Rick Nichols.
And I'm Matthew Warnick.
We'll be bringing you entertainment from the local area musicians, information concerning local businesses, and we'll also help to keep your calendar up to date with schedules for up-and-coming events. Our program is coming at you from Circle of Sound in Olympia, Washington. This full-service recording studio also offers in-house mastering, CD and DVD duplication, digital transfers, and audio restoration. Circle of Sound, reasonable rates, and local convenience.
And on today's episode, we're going to put the spotlight on the Oly Mountain Boys. We're going to play 3 of their songs from their Through the Sky CD and have a really good interview.
Daddy used to work in the coal mines, quit because he wasn't feeling well. Told me the only day he would return was the day that they froze over hell. The day that they froze over hell. Mama kicked me out, I was 18, yelled it at me clear as a bell. You ain't gonna do to me what your daddy did. What she meant she'd never tell. Just what she meant she'd never tell. Everyone's got a song to sell. The day that I choose to bring a child into this world is the day that they froze over hell. The day that they froze over hell. As days pass on, like to say the good times are gone.
And hopefully that day isn't today. We're going to play another song called West Oly Blues for you. Today we have in the studio the Oly Mountain Boys. They are Ty Menser, banjo and vocals, Chris Rutledge, guitar and vocals, Phil Post, bass, dobro and vocals, Josh Grice, fiddle, and not with us is Derek McSwain, mandolin and vocals. So how are you guys today?
Good.
Great.
Doing well. Thanks.
Thank you for coming in. And tell everybody at home what kind of music you guys do.
Bluegrass.
Bluegrass.
Bluegrass music, yeah.
So you are a bluegrass band?
A lot of bands call themselves bluegrass, but we like to think that we really are bluegrass.
What differentiates you from the other bands that are calling themselves bluegrass?
That's what I was about to ask.
That's a big question, Rick. Yeah, it's a raging debate within the genre. Yeah, it all started with Bill Monroe, like on my T-shirt right here. He developed a style of music, and that style became copied in the 50s by all sorts of other groups, and then, of course, it's just sort of expanded as people don't just play the same type of music that exactly how it was played in the 50s. So people go far afield, and it's a great debate how far afield you can go, and it's still bluegrass. You know, things like Alison Krauss, to our ears, doesn't sound very bluegrass, but you know, she's called the queen of bluegrass. She certainly has played it in her career, but her modern stuff doesn't sound to us like bluegrass. But there's other bands that are closer. Infamous String Dusters, Steep Canyon Rangers. These are pretty popular bands that we would say are definitely playing bluegrass.
Yonder Mountain String Band, Green Sky Bluegrass, all kind of fringe bands. They call themselves jamgrass sometimes.
Yeah, and there's newgrass and jamgrass and everything. But we think that we're still pretty close to Bill Monroe and traditional bluegrass.
So you're not into the acid bluegrass?
Not yet.
Not playing it, at least. I love listening to some of it.
Do you think there's like a difference in areas? Like, do you think maybe up here, bluegrass might be considered different than maybe like down south in Mississippi?
I think so. I'd be the first one to say, yeah. Because even though our worlds have been expanded by technology, there is still a local flavor to musicians, because they still get together on certain evenings and jam with each other and teach each other those songs. So there is a regional flavor and subtle differences in even the most traditional stock of bluegrass songs that everybody plays. Everybody, different areas, different towns, municipalities play the songs differently, and so they has their little different style.
I feel like jamgrass elements, influences are probably more accepted in the Pacific Northwest than they would be in the South.
In Colorado too. That's
the whole West.
The stronghold of rock/bluegrass or jamgrass.
So jamgrass, explain that to me.
Well, Yonder Mountain String Band, Phil mentioned, I think that's a good example. I mean, they're playing bluegrass instruments. They're usually plugged in, so they get more volume and can play to more rock and roll style audiences. And they'll extend the songs out. It's not the precision and the intricacy is probably less important as opposed to traditional bluegrass, and it's more, jamming, kind of like I think of it as like the Allman Brothers concept of rock music applied to bluegrass. And when you
Medeski, Martin Wood, the Grateful Dead, they all are jam bands.
You stretch that out.
Fish is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all bands that you just add bluegrass to it and you end up with bands like Yonder Mountain.
And what's great about that for bands like Green Sky Bluegrass and Yonder Mountain is they've expanded their audience. I mean, they get a lot of the same folks that travel around with Fish and Grateful Dead and stuff, that it's getting them to see that, we can relate to that music, but now it's on banjos and fiddles, and then they get interested in that, and they hear jams, and hopefully, we hope that leads them all the way to Bill Monroe. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's the hope.
Is there a big following in the Olympic Peninsula or the Olympic area for bluegrass? Do you guys get a lot of fans in this area specifically?
I'd say so, yeah. I'd even like to say, or suppose that we've helped kind of build one around here and have exposed enough people now that, I run into this as our next level, I suppose. I hear people say, oh, I have a friend that's seen you guys and said you were great. So, we may not be flying in the face of everybody right now, but we're starting to, I think, develop a name around here, and it's enough that it's starting to lure people in. So I think, yeah.
I moved to Olympia 5.5 years ago, and as I was arriving here, there had been bluegrass bands. Phil was in a couple of them that were just kind of dissolving. So it was perfect timing for me because there was kind of a vacuum of a traditional band in Olympia. But I know from being in the scene now that, you know, Phil was in a band called Head for the Hills and Cabin Kind, and before that, I'm sure there were others, but those are the two I know that were somewhat similar to us that just predated us by, you know, a year or two. And so I think there's definitely an audience for it in Olympia.
And so, getting to that subject, how did you guys meet?
It started with when I came here because I came from Alaska and I had gotten really into bluegrass up there, and I had started playing in a band. So when I moved here, I had to leave that behind, and I was really wanted, you know, great experience, and I wanted to basically, you know, put a band together. So I was going to jams and going to all the things I could do to network, banjo camp and wintergrass and all the jams in the region from Tacoma, Chehalis. And I met Derek, our mandolin player, through a friend that I met through the jams. And then Phil we met through a Craigslist post, essentially. And Chris. I mean, Phil knew some of the people I was playing with.
You called Barbara, and Barbara referred you to me, I think.
Well, Julie Campbell.
Julie Campbell.
There was a fiddler named Julie Campbell that I'd met, and she was going to be in our band, and she knew Phil, and kind of brought him in. And then she wasn't able to stay with the band, but Phil and I hit it off and felt like we had a good similar mentality, so we kept in touch. Let's keep in touch with players. We met Derek right after that, and then we just needed a guitar at that point. So we Craigslisted ad, and that Chris responded to that, and he can maybe explain why he got into the band. And we added Josh a year later.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit vice versa, but that's because I'm a guitar player, I suppose, and the world revolves around me. But yeah, I had gone to the String Summit and seen a lot of great bands. I came from blues and rock and roll and big amplifiers and electric guitars, and had a great weekend at this festival. Was watching people play around the fire and acoustically. So I came home, immediately bought a guitar and jumped on the internet because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know anything about jams or where this community might exist. I just wanted to do it. So I put an ad on Craigslist saying I was looking to play, and within 24 hours, Ty had responded, said, "Hey, I happen to know a bass player and a mandolin. Let's get together and try this out." So yeah, I think we started, it was about 5 years ago, and the idea was just to learn a couple, 3 or 4 songs that afternoon in the living room, go home for a week, and come back and try them again and see what happens. And
then they played together for about 6 months in what I like to call the proto Oly Mountain Boys. They started having a jam at Tugboat Annie's, where they'd have a show and then an open jam circle afterwards, and I showed up to that one night, and they sort of just poached me, and all of a sudden I was in the band because I guess part of the ulterior motive there was to get themselves a fiddler, so they found me.
Josh plays with the symphony, and it was an interesting thing because he had not played bluegrass, didn't know any of the songs, but I could tell his ear was just so good. I mean, throughout a song like Clinch Mountain Backstep, he didn't know the song. He's flailing around, and by the end of the jam circle, he's playing all the notes. And I just right away said, that guy can play. I mean, he may not play bluegrass yet, but he will be able to if he's interested. And so we asked him, and he's turned into a pretty good fiddler.
And so, did you have to sell your violin and go buy a fiddle? Or what?
The best joke I've ever heard on that one is the difference between the violin and the fiddle is the same as the difference between the guitar and the guitar. It's the same instrument, just a different way of approaching it. So.
Yeah, one doesn't burn longer than the other. Not in this case.
And so, why did you guys form a bluegrass band specifically? I guess you could have done anything with that kind of talent.
When you play the banjo, you want to play bluegrass. I mean, you can put banjo into different kinds of instruments, but banjo is bluegrass, in my opinion, and that's just what I wanted to play. That's why I wanted to play the banjo. I wouldn't be interested in. I was actually in an outlaw, what we called an outlaw country band called Rodeo Kill in town, and it was fun. But you know, it's loud, and the banjo is really supplementary and often buried. What the banjo does well doesn't really come through, in my opinion. And it was fun because I liked the guys and I had great bandmates and good music, but wasn't as fun as playing bluegrass.
Didn't you play in a rock band at one time too?
Well, that's the band I'm talking about.
Oh, that is it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rodeo Kill. It was a loud rock and roll band, but we played like Willie Nelson covers and originals, and then a bunch of like honky tonk, outlaw country, but played in kind of punk rock force. And then I had to find a way to get loud enough with my banjo over all that.
Oh, that must have been a unique combination right there.
It was pretty.
Mostly the banjo, despite the fact that Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass, played mandolin, it's probably, he knew this too, the banjo is the signature instrument for the style. And there are bands that have the other 4 or 5 standard instruments of bluegrass that don't have banjo, but that's called newgrass.
Yeah, or Americana.
Or Americana. There's different names for this thing, but if you listen to it, you can definitely tell, no matter what they play, it's going to have a slightly different texture because of the lack of the banjo. The banjo gives it the drive. It's like the hi-hat, the eighth notes.
There's rhythmic elements
Pulse.
of a banjo. I mean, the banjo is played with 3 fingers, and most bluegrass music's in 4/4 time or cut time, but it's in groups of 4. So you're putting 3 finger rolls over 4, so you have a polyrhythm right there, and that creates this natural syncopation that really gives bluegrass its kind of toe-tapping push forward.
Real tight, quick.
So you just don't have bluegrass dry without the banjo, because that's what is driving it forward. The mandolin's chopping in the 4 and the bass and the guitar, and then the banjo's doing these essentially 3-3-2 or 2-3-3. I mean, you can divide it up, but it's a 3-finger roll over a 4-finger rhythmic pattern. So there's an inherent tension and drive.
Yeah, because basically you're plucking strings.
Yeah, I'm
Where
playing
the
that.
guitar is, what, strumming more so?
It's essentially the same. I mean, with a pick, I would pluck, I suppose. But I just use one single flat pick, and I'm trying to cover all my strings, whether all at once with a strum or individually by picking them, whereas he's using 3 picks, one on each of 3 fingers, to essentially accomplish that same thing and then some. Like he's saying, that's where he's.
Well, maybe Rick's question too is also that, when I say bluegrass banjo, it's the 3-finger style. There's also the clawhammer style, which is much more like strumming a guitar. You use your thumb and the rest of your fingers in a kind of a pattern that creates a sound that's more akin to a strummed guitar. But that's not the way bluegrass is played on the banjo.
So while you're using 3 and you're using 1, do you have to work real hard not to finish the song a lot faster than he does?
Yeah, well, the other joke that we like is, we're trying to sell CDs to say, banjo music, you get more notes for your money than any other type of music. So you're really getting a good deal when you pay $15 for a CD.
How true, yes.
Have you ever
Of course,
performed?
they all, constantly use the term picking, and this term doesn't work for me. I don't know what they're talking about. Bowing.
He only knows
it's
it
a different. It's a different
Italian.
animal.
It's a bluegrass term of art.
Pizzicato.
I was just gonna ask, have you ever performed
translate for him.
for fun dueling banjos? That's a very popular banjo.
Chris tries to make us do it.
Yeah,
We're not smart enough to do that song.
The funny part of that song is it
I
just
guess you need
takes.
2 banjo players first.
You don't actually.
It was guitar and banjo.
Yeah,
okay.
there was never 2 banjos there. It's just
Really, I
a
didn't know that.
term, yeah. That's a good question. That is dueling banjos.
The
Plural.
three most famous banjos. The 3 most famous bluegrass songs are all from movies. So a lot of times in shows you get it's Foggy Mountain Breakdown from Bonnie and Clyde, Man of Constant Sorrow from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and Dueling Banjos from Deliverance, right?
Yep.
So everybody at the shows will go play that one from the movie, and then we can make a joke that we'll just break. Oh, you mean this one? Oh no, you mean.
Foggy
And we
Mountain
all,
Breakdown. Here we go.
or we'll do an entirely different one, and
That doesn't include the Beverly Hillbillies theme.
well, no, that's TV. Yeah, and that's probably the next most.
true.
That one and Rocky Top are also really famous, but those 3 are kind of the signature pop bluegrass songs.
We'll have to learn as time goes by. You'll learn from that movie, yeah. Casablanca.
See, for me, I have to use what material I can get here. A little out of my league. So you probably saw this next one coming. but I think it's a good question.
Fastball, right down the middle.
Fastball, here it comes. How does your music differ from popular country or mainstream country music?
Oh, well, that's a good question.
Somebody
Again,
answer quick.
it helps, especially when you're dealing with traditions, to go back to the root of something. And back in the 20s, when basically because of the state of the culture and the turn of the century and the new technologies, there was a lot of different styles that were beginning to be developed at the same time. Back then, there was no difference. Everything was country. Everything that was remotely, country that played on acoustic instruments. The Carters and the Stanleys, is all kind of thrown into one barrel. And then each band started developing their own style and their identity. And as that happened, the styles developed along with them because they were the prototypical, purveyors of those style. And what happened was one branch went through Bill Monroe and one branch went through Hank Williams, and everybody kind of followed in those footsteps and just started growing in a different way. And I don't know exactly what else to say about it. Bluegrass is a pretty specific style of music, a specific lineup of instruments. Country and Western can be that way as well. In country Western, it's more electric for one thing.
It's a bit more like rock.
The vocal style is different, although it's based on the same singing style, the same throat style.
They use drums and...
They use drums.
Some of them rap now too.
Yeah, I mean, what is called country now, and I'm even a country purist when it comes to that. It's not even country, but it's pop with cowboy boots on. But the difference here, I can pretty much just tell you the difference in the instrumentation, let you figure out the rest. Bluegrass is acoustic bass, banjo, mandolin, acoustic guitar, and fiddle with the dobro sometimes. Country Western band is drums, bass, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, piano, fiddle, and pedal steel guitar or lap steel guitar. And the songs tend to be slower. Bluegrass obviously is known for their fast picking, but when you break it down, there are as many similarities between the parts. They're just put together in a different way.
This may not relate to the Hank Williams analogy very well, but one of the things that definitely was a major break was bluegrass was quite popular nationally in the mid-'50s. And then when Elvis Presley and rock and roll took hold, a lot of traditional hillbilly or country artists jumped on that bandwagon and took that music into its and I think that developed into more of the modern country sound, whereas other folks like Bill Monroe stuck right with what they were doing before, weathered the storm. Times were lean for bluegrass artists in the late 50s and early 60s, and only got back going for two reasons. I've read a lot of the books on bluegrass, and one was the folk revival in the early 60s. They thought, in addition to these Joan Baez and Bob Dylans and stuff, we were looking for something true and authentic, and this bluegrass music from the South, that seems to be something we're interested in. So they brought Flatt and Scruggs up to the college campuses in the Northeast. And then the festival movement started in 1964, and bluegrass festivals started in the summer, bringing people together, and that whole thing became something that revived bluegrass, and it got back on its feet by the mid-'60s. Flatt and Scruggs and the
Beverly
Hillbillies. They had a couple of lucky pop hits with Bonnie and Clyde stuff, and so by the mid-'60s, bluegrass kind of wasn't as big as it was as a national, chart-topping thing, but it was solid again.
Back in the running.
Yeah, and so then bands just continued to stick with that.
But by that time, country music had ensconced itself in Nashville as the big money maker, the breadwinner. And so, of course, everybody followed the money towards that.
And some bands tinkered with both, like the Osborne Brothers. They kind of jumped back and forth.
Ricky Skaggs. There's a lot of crossover. Lots and lots. Dixie Chicks. They all cross over.
Like if you watched Hee Haw, I grew up with that as a kid, and I think that's a great
Roy Clark
amount. All those artists are doing exactly
Glenn
what
Campbell.
they're talking about right here. Traditionally, you would find them picking bluegrass or jamming and that such, but then they come into Hee Haw and they're performing. They're more of a country or rock ilk, but they're all the same musicians. So
bluegrass is to jazz bluegrass is to country what jazz is to funk. Like a lot of the musicians in funk bands or jazz musicians who that's their paying gig, but they sneak away at night.
Right. That's Ricky Skaggs' whole thing.
And he sneaks away to like the festivals.
Well, now he really embraced bluegrass, but in the 80s, when I got into bluegrass, I just knew Ricky Skaggs as a country pop artist, and I had no idea that he was a legitimate, because I didn't know the history of as well as I do now. But he's gone fully back into bluegrass. But at that time, it was just like Phil said, he would like sneak off and play bluegrass for, but then just make these records because they were selling.
Trying to capitalize on the ambiguity between the styles.
Country has definitely evolved. Bluegrass has evolved. Do you see bluegrass as using more harmony, particularly between the vocalist, than you do with country today? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, harmony singing is one of the
Three-part
essential
harmonies.
elements of bluegrass.
yeah, because you guys are big on 3-part harmonies.
That's
Just watching
yeah.
your videos, I could tell that's probably the truth. But I mean, I'll
That
let
goes
the
back to
experts
choral.
answer.
Yeah. It goes back to the choral roots of bluegrass and the gospel roots, where you have whole choirs singing 3 or 4 parts. Country music is a lot more like pop in that regard because it's usually just 2 voices. A lot of times, unless it's live, it's the same singer singing both parts. They have no shame about that. More
Now,
like rock and roll.
all this being said about country and pop, we don't want anyone to think that if Taylor Swift wanted us to, do a project together, I'm sure we could make it work. So,
I've tried that with her and it didn't work out.
I mean, as Phil said, there's a lot more similarities and differences.
So is it we're never ever getting back together?
I don't know. I heard she's looking for
We
inspiration.
were
for a new
never,
breakup
ever,
song.
ever,
I'm here. I'm telling you.
ever together.
Or what if Toby Keith asked you? Would you go then?
Oh man,
Tougher call.
that is.
I'm more into
Odd
Gary
quiet.
Allen.
Yeah, if Taylor
George
Swift was
Strait.
opening for him, I can see something like that.
I could hang with George Strait.
And that'd work.
Somebody I'd like to drink beers with.
Vince Gill's another guy who
Vince Gill is another crossover person.
people think of him as this, pop art, but he's got deep. He's a great musician.
He's a monster.
Deep
Yeah.
bluegrass
He was
roots.
the Portland River City Bluegrass
Yeah,
Festival a couple years ago.
Yeah, I got to see him.
It's amazing when you think back on the artists like Glenn Campbell that you mentioned earlier, Phil, that actually played with the Beach Boys there for a brief period of time back
Parents
in the
White
60s.
played with Birds.
And
greatest bluegrass player
Vince
ever.
Gill was asked to play with the Dire Straits. Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it. Kind of goes back to what you said earlier about you can look at these different musicians playing in different genres, though.
They all respected each
Can't
other.
take away good, right?
Elvis would play Bill's songs, and Bill would, try to write songs like Elvis. So, yeah.
See, and I kind of asked that question because I've never been a big fan of country, but I grew up on like my mom's country music, which is like Garth Brooks, kind of what you had said, pop country. But then I listened
like
to
that.
bands. Yeah, it was better back in the day than it is now. But I listened to bands like yours, and I'm like, wow, this is actually good music, and I guess it would be considered country, but in a different light. Country would be better if it was like this. So.
Yeah, I honestly, to me, bluegrass is quite. I mean, historically they're related, but at this point in time, I see bluegrass as very distinct from country, and we're more. I think that our fan base, people that really like what we do, are more likely to like. I'm trying to think something besides country. I mean, they're more likely to like. Kind of what I said, the Grateful Dead, I think, or something, or more. They're more likely to be into that band than something like George Strait or Toby Keith. I mean that the natural progression of the interest of the fans doesn't seem to go very. To me, there's a pretty big wall from country to bluegrass. Yeah. And when we play, like we've played at the Big Whiskey Saloon, we've played a couple of times for those types of true country audiences, and I think they like what we did, but. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're very used to it.
They couldn't.
The venues weren't set up. The
Bluegrass, yeah.
venues weren't set up to play it. They obviously did not have acoustic music there very often.
A lot of times, if you listen to country recordings on the more rootsy songs, you'll hear all the bluegrass instruments inserted as flavoring, just to give it more of an old feel. You hear dobro or some banjo, and of course fiddle's already there. So yeah, I mean, they're definitely connected, although like Ty says, there's a definite seam to that connection. Kind of across, when you're in bluegrass or whether you're playing country or rock.
Well, here's another way to answer the same question. If you told us, okay, you're going to play a big gig, you don't get to have any your Oly Mountain Boys audience isn't going to be there. Choose a different audience. I would rather have some certain rock and roll audiences, then I would choose a country audience in terms of how I think they're gonna, I want to make sure there's a receptive, and like we've played with bands like Fruition String Band out of Portland and things like that. I mean, I consider them a rock band. I mean, they do have a fiddle and stuff, but they're not at all country. But that's the direction. I mean, our music kind of connects to them, I think, better than it does some straight country.
And a lot of the old like 60s rock I grew up and I'm kind of a fan on has very country influence. Not all of it, but a good chunk of it has
A lot of the best
obvious country influence.
Yeah.
Flying Burrito Brothers.
Allman
Skinner,
Brothers.
definitely.
Marshall Tucker Band.
We do
Grateful
Graham
Dead,
Parsons songs.
Exactly. Charlie Daniels Band. They're all like country rock.
Well, what's your take on like Stephen Grappelli or Bella Fleck and the Flecktones then?
See, Rick's saving me on this interview, by the way.
I'll speak to Bella as a banjo player. He's an amazing player. I love watching him, but he does about 10% of the time stuff that I appreciate, and when he does that, I'm awed. But he likes to play. I think he's just, I don't know why, but he's motivated to play things that I'm not very interested in, especially his electric stuff. And the Flecktones is like, I do not like Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. I do like other things that he does. It's not bluegrass. Like I saw him down at the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival, playing with, I'm going to get the names wrong, but it was more like a classical musicians doing this kind of improvisation, and I found that very compelling and interesting. But when he plugs in and does the electric,
The jazz.
the jazzy stuff, it just sounds new agey. It's just aesthetically, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's kind of KPLU-ish. One of my favorite Bela Fleck projects involves playing with African musicians, because the banjo originated in Africa, so he was trying to make that full circle, and it's really an excellent album for anybody.
And I watched it's also a movie,
Right,
and it was, and I loved
documentary.
it.
He likes
Yeah,
to do
Throw
that.
Down Your Heart, it's called, and that was great.
Yeah.
He tried to he learned the folk musics of different regions of Africa and tried to fit the banjo, the way he plays the banjo, fit it in respectfully to their music.
Traditional chord playing and whatever the older versions of the banjo are.
It was really interesting.
Beat 'em ball.
I'm going to have to check that out. I
Old
haven't seen
Brazilian instruments.
Yeah, it's only a few years ago, and it's great. The CD and the DVD.
Well, and I mean, just to chime in, I like a variety of. I mean, anything that you can insert a violin into, turns my ear on. But there is something, particularly unique about the acoustic quality of bluegrass that attracts my ear. I like a lot of the more traditional stuff. I maybe range a bit, a bit further out from that in stylistically. I mean, but I like most of what I wind up liking stays fairly close to the roots of the instrumental composition of bluegrass. So.
And I like that the violin is a prominent instrument too, as well. Mm-hmm. When you think country people, you really don't, or country music, you really don't think the violin. Mm-hmm. But it is, and it does work really well. Yeah. In an earlier cut of this interview, I mispronounced dobro.
It's already been spliced out.
Yeah, but could you kind of explain that instrument? I think a lot of our viewers probably may not actually know about that one.
Well,
I don't.
As is the case with most things relating to bluegrass, it has a very short and very convoluted, complex history. The dobro is based on the short story. The dobro is based on a Hawaiian slide guitar. Apparently, it was Hawaiian guitar started in the 1880s, and it was kind of co-opted early on by a lot of that early proto-country musical styles that were coming about right then. And when the Dopieri brothers, these Czechoslovakian brothers got together in the 20s.
In L.A., right?
I think it was L.A., yeah. It was a big family, too. But that's later. They were trying to design an instrument, a guitar, in fact, that, since it was one of the quieter instruments at the time, and venues were getting bigger and bigger, they had more instruments no matter what the style was, they had more instruments to compete with. The Dopieri brothers sought to create an instrument that was louder, and hence they made a resophonic guitar. And they called it a dobro because the Dopieri brothers, Do Bros. And that's basically the beginning of bluegrass guitar. Of course, a couple of years later, the Depression hit, and when it came back, they were developing electric amplification for instruments. So it was almost obsolete by the time it was even developed. But by that time, people were starting to fall in love with its unique vocal quality. And when I talk about steel guitar, I'm talking about a guitar that's played on your lap or played in that position. Sometimes a pedal steel guitar, lap steel guitar, dobro, they're all steel guitars because they're played on your lap with steel, which is a solid bar of metal, as opposed to a slide, which is hollow. That is the short, convoluted history of dobro guitar.
So the correct name for the instrument is actually resophonic guitar,
yeah.
But it's commonly known as a dobro because that was the
12
first.
of the short, convoluted history of dobro.
Xerox and Kleenex and
Funny,
Escalator.
I learned bluegrass up in Alaska, and the father of Alaska bluegrass, Carl Hoffman, he always had a band in Fairbanks where I lived, and he had a monster good dobro player named Danny Burbridge that played in his band, and Carl was a student of bluegrass history, and he would always say, Danny Burbridge on the resophonic guitar, and Danny would always joke and go, "Is that what I'm playing?"
By the way, in case you don't know what it looks like there's a speaker, a silver speaker in the middle where the sound hole would be. That's how you know. And besides the fact that it's played on your lap. But one of my favorite dobro jokes was Bill Monroe, who apparently did not bless the addition of the dobro to the bluegrass family, as did one of the Stanleys. I can't remember which one. Carter Stanley.
Ralph
Stanley did.
Yeah, it's in his autobiography.
So anyway, one time, Bill Monroe was backstage with one of the dobro greats, one of the original proto-dobro players was Josh Graves, played with Earl Scruggs. I do that all the time. But anyway, so he encountered Bill Monroe backstage, and Bill Monroe, who knew him, went up to him and says, "Uncle Josh, so what is that? What is that thing you play again? What would you call that instrument?" And he said, "Well, Bill, it's called a dobro." And he says, Yeah, dobro, that's it. I hate it."
And
that was it.
And to chip in, Ralph Stanley and the Stanley brothers are probably the second most famous bluegrass band after the Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. The closest they came to breaking up was Carter wanted to steal Josh Graves and bring him into the Stanley Brothers, and Ralph just drew a line in the sand. Ralph and Carter got along famously and were very close, but Ralph said, "Absolutely, you bring a dobro in this band, I'm quitting." And he finally, and Carter capitulated.
Yeah.
There never was a dobro in the Stanley
It
Brothers.
might have split up the Monroes.
But yet, Flatt and Scruggs, the third of the great traditional bands, embraced it wholeheartedly with Josh Graves, and it became a signature part of their sound. So
it snuck into the Oly Mountain Boys because our bass player plays it, of course. We
Yeah,
didn't really get a choice.
Quite well, as a matter of fact.
Well, this is an interesting part of what the band does because it's unique to our abilities. Josh, who plays the fiddle, and then an acoustic bass, just a big, really huge fiddle. So we're like, "Josh, play that thing." He was fooling around with it. He was interested in it, and when he was picked it right up, like he does, and then we just all of a sudden, ding, ding, ding. That'll free. If he'll play on a few songs, that'll free Phil up to play the dobro. So we try to work in a small section of our set where Josh moves from the little fiddle to the big fiddle, and Phil moves over to the dobro, and then we can present another whole set of textures and sound palette to the audience.
It's a different. It's a interesting and very different role to play in the band, playing the bass versus the fiddle. The fiddle's very ornamental and textured and melodic, and the bass, you're trying to hold it down the whole song.
Rhythm means nothing to the fiddler.
Yes, exactly.
Fiddle plays before time, after time, through time, out of time.
Yeah.
But the bass player must
ahead of
play
time.
in time.
Behind the beat, in front of
It
the
was also very difficult in the early going. It's a big instrument with big strings, and making it through a whole song,
Trying to hold
my
that
hand
on
would
your
be
At
on
150
fire
beats a
by the
minute.
end of it. Yeah.
Now you're not bowing it, right? You're usually plucking it with your fingers, so there's a difference there as well.
Yeah, that's where I get to pick.
You kept going back. Is it Stanley that you keep referring
Ralph
to?
Stanley
Ralph Stanley.
and the Stanley
Now,
Brothers.
For the people that don't know, he was a big part of the Oh Brother Where Art.
He was. His song he wrote, or I don't know that he wrote it, but his song "Man of Constant Sorrow" was kind of the signature song. It wasn't his version actually in the movie.
But Ralph Stanley wrote that song? Because
Well,
wasn't that Dan with the Union Station?
Yeah, his version was not used. He actually sings the song "Oh Death" on that soundtrack.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he sings another song on that soundtrack. But he sang "Man of Constant Sorrow." I mean, it's considered.
Yeah.
And I've
Originally?
heard. I've heard people say he wrote it and didn't write it, and I'm not sure about that. I don't want to misstate it, but it's considered his song.
Because in that
But
movie,
he did a version of it.
it was the Soggy Bottom Brothers. or
Yeah,
something.
Soggy
like that.
Bottom
And
Boys.
I remember that song
Dan
blew up.
Tick-Tick.
Dan Tominski of Alison Krauss's band was actually the one that
did.
That's
did
the
it
voice
from the
that
record.
you hear, yeah. That's who George Clooney's
It's
listening
not
to.
George
I was
Clooney
going to say
yet.
it's not George Clooney.
A surprise.
Well, they don't call him an actor for nothing.
Earl Scruggs passed away earlier, about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. Bill Monroe's been dead for quite a few years. Ralph Stanley is kind of the
Preeminent.
emeritus. Yeah, you know, he's still alive. He's 90, in his early 90s, and he performs still. So he's out there. He's the last living legend of bluegrass at this point. His brother Carter died in the 60s. He was a severe alcoholic. And then Ralph went out on his own with Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys, and he's been doing that since the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
So if Ralph Stanley actually heard this interview and decided to send you guys an autographed album, you'd accept?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would put that on my wall. I actually have Ralph Stanley's autograph.
Send 5 then, Ralph.
That's it.
I have a banjo head that I collect famous banjo players' signatures, because at the one neat thing about bluegrass festivals is, you know, these are not massive mega stars. They usually, every band, it's almost a rule that you come down and shake hands with the audience and sign records after your performance. So at the River City Bluegrass Festival in Portland, which is now defunct, but they've had a lot of great traditional bands, and mainly at that festival I got a lot of famous people's signatures, Ralph Stanley being one.
All right.
A few years ago, so that was neat.
So, for your music, do you guys ever or have ever played any instruments that are not string based? Maybe like a drum or.
There's always a guy in the audience who has a harmonica and wants to play with it. We acquiesce
The
to that.
unofficial
No.
harmonica.
I think the answer is no, but I
Not in
do,
the
for our
band.
next album, I am considering, things of that nature like a harmonica. Harmonica's been used effectively in some bluegrass music that I really like the classic Will the Circle Be Unbroken super session album from the early 70s with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and all the old bluegrass masters. They added little things like brushes and harmonica, just little touches to
Woodblock
pretty much
string.
otherwise straight bluegrass, and it really was nicely done.
Yeah.
So I don't find that to be offensive to my sensibilities if it's done tastefully.
What about like an African thumb piano?
There's, Josh jokes about the harmonica, but the drums. I mean, we have had situations where we've almost had to get come to blows with
Call
people
the
that
bluegrass
insist
cops.
that they should be able to play drums with us. Maybe it's a performance, but it's not a formal performance, and they want to play, and we just don't. No, it just doesn't fit our music. It doesn't belong there. It's probably likely to mess us up more than to help us. And some people just don't understand that we mean what we say when we say there's no drums in bluegrass.
No djembe.
Yeah.
Did you don't?
Did you know?
You don't.
But no, I get that a lot too. You get when people, they run into you and they're like, "Hey man, you guys sound great. If you're ever looking for a drummer, give me a call. Love
Thanks.
to sit in with you guys."
Probably
Sure.
look to you being the guitar player.
That is a
come on,
good
man,
avenue.
come on.
And so, Chris, speaking of that, what do you tell them when they ask about, if you ever want a guitar player?
I volunteer to let them come on in. They're welcome to come join. That frees me up to court the ladies because it's hard to do both at the same time. So.
That's what music is about.
Oh, yeah.
Courting the ladies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and bluegrass especially.
Do you guys ever do open mic nights?
We used to when we were just getting started. We're just kind of too busy for that these days. We seem to have enough gigs coming our way that we don't get out there too much.
Every once in a while after practice, that's the other thing too. We'll get together on a Tuesday night to rehearse, and we get done at midnight, 12:30. So by the time you're all wrapped up there, open mic, and then the other nights we got gigs and stuff. But every once in a while, I've been known to run down to Buzz's Tavern or something after a practice to have a beer and get snookered into doing a song or two. So.
Or just get snookered.
It's hard for the band. The open mics are just not set up like sound-wise for us.
Yeah.
So they usually have one mic, and we're like a full band acoustic, and we can't be heard in a crowded bar with a single mic unless it's a large diaphragm condenser, which is not the kind of mic they usually have. So it usually ends up being, and then we're frustrated because here we are playing and parts of our sound can't be heard.
That's when we turn into a rock band and like get
Plug
the amps
everybody in.
and the chords.
But see, even when we plug in, three-part harmony is a signature part of our sound. So we still need 3 vocal mics because it's not going to sound like the Oly Mountain Boys without the 3-part harmony. So even there, we could plug everybody in, not be happy with how the instruments sound, and still not be able to sing the way we like to sing. So, yeah.
So you guys are striving for some perfection when you're performing.
It's called open mic, bro. Not mics.
Right. We've heard that.
So what are some of your like current favorite songs or musicians aside from your own?
Down the line, what do you listen to?
Oh
Down the line.
man, I don't know.
don't believe it.
Weird stuff strikes me at different times. The other night I was home working on guitar, and next thing I knew, I was playing Ricky Nelson's greatest hits for like 2 hours. So what's my latest greatest? I on a big Ricky Nelson kick.
Phil picked up a stack of 78s from Outside Rainy Day Records, and last night we were over at his house listening to these fantastic old jab Benny Goodman and Count Basie.
I live with a 66-year-old professional clarinet player, and he knew I had these old records, the old 78s, so probably from the 20s and 30s. And I just put one on, and the whole night he was pulling these things out, playing these 4 or 5 minute songs.
He was hand-picking songs from us from the whole
Oh my
stack.
God! Telling us histories and stuff
That's
like
cool.
that.
DJing for you.
Yeah, so that's some of the stuff that I've been listening to. I stopped listening lately in the last week. I've been listening to Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin. It's been my 3, and classical too. For some reason, that seemed to be hitting the whistle or hitting the spot, wetting my whistle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, playing off of that, I'm a classical musician also. Play with the Olympia Symphony. Just started diving into some Brahms and some Elgar. Both very good pieces. We played the Beethoven's 9th in October, which was fantastic. Phil was there.
That was in front row.
Brought a crowd with him. It's sort of, the artists that always, when I talk about what inspires me, in the bluegrass realm, the fiddler I'm trying to, wishing I sounded like is Jason Carter, who plays with the Del McCurry Band. We got a chance to see them also in October at the Washington Center for Performing Arts here in Olympia. And that really kind of, that got me fired up to try to sound more like him. There's a fiddler named Casey Dreesen, who this ranges quite far from what you'd consider bluegrass, but he plays 5-string acoustic electric fiddle, does some very wacky stuff with it. He's a connoisseur of this rhythmic chopping style that's really all his own. Nobody else does it like that, and he does all kinds of interesting things worth checking out. And I think Chris Thiele too. And since Derek's not here, I gotta mention some mandolin players.
Punch Brothers.
Yeah, he has a
That's
band
what
called the
he's
Punch
listening to.
Brothers, and he's literally a genius. They gave him an award, the MacArthur Genius Grant, for being a genius. I mean, he does things that are just out of this world on the mandolin. So, and he collaborates with all kinds of people. He put out an album just recently with Edgar Meyer, who's an incredible bass player. Stuart Duncan, who's a bluegrass fiddler, and Yo-Yo Ma, the classical cellist. So it's called the Goat Rodeo Sessions, which is also a very interesting album that I've been listening to lately.
And I was a punk and indie rock radio DJ back in college before I even knew anything about bluegrass. So when I'm not listening to pretty pure traditional bluegrass, I'm listening to something totally different, and that definitely warps my brain when I write. I do a lot of songwriting for the band, and so a lot of the weird stuff we come up with is somehow somewhere my brain has to bring those two things together in some kind of harmony. So I mean, it's absolutely fascinating to me.
And I think that's an interesting point to bring up too, as I was just going to say, coming from my point of view as a new bluegrass guy, when I started, you get, okay, we're going to learn Maple on a Hill. So I can listen to it done by 3 or 4 different people or groups. It's going to sound similar in the way they present it. I can copy it, and bang, I can play it. But when you're writing your own music and, you know, one of your bandmates brings a song to you, there's no reference of, well, what's this going to sound like? What does the guitar sound like when it's playing? So all that you got to kind of come up with, and you know, if that's not what Ty wants to hear, you know, my flavor is not what he has in his ear. He's got to be able to say, hey man, no, I don't want you to play it like this. Try it like this. So and then my ego gets in the way. And, well, I'm not playing it wrong, man. He's not liking it the way I'm playing it. So you know, you got to kind of be mindful of situations like that and realize, well, it's not about ego.
But on the other hand, like I really like the way we collaborate. I mean, I feel a lot of creative freedom in what, I mean, Ty's given us the structure a lot of the times, or Derek does some songwriting also, but I feel like I can contribute, you know, in a songwriting capacity to some extent, just by coming up with different things to play on the fiddle. So.
Yeah.
And it helps that I don't know these guys' instruments. I mean, maybe if I could play their instruments as well as them, I would write out parts for them and tell them, you're going to play this, but I don't know what to play on the dobro. I just tell Phil, like, make it sound kind of weepy, and, you know, I give him really vague, like, direction, and I know that he's got the ability to translate that into a part, and same with Josh.
We've all got our stamp in different songs.
Definitely.
Well, it sounds like you all get along really well. You've been together, 5 years now? And you haven't introduced a Yoko into the band.
No.
Just yokels. Hey, I've got it. A new project. We do like plastic Ono bands, bluegrass style. Call it Yokel Ono. It just came to me. There you go.
We're going to copyright that right after this interview, so
okay.
Nobody take
You
it.
hear that? That's copyrighted. All you.
Yeah, it's a poor man copyright right here as we're recording it.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. It's on tape. Get us
So,
gold.
since we have our first band in here, it's actually a good direction. Maybe kind of explain maybe your favorite part of the band dynamic, or how well it works for you guys specifically.
Sure. I think for me, it's my favorite band dynamic is its organic nature. Coming from effects pedals, and you know, I can bend a note on a Les Paul and have 40 minutes of sustain and drink a beer and go to the bathroom and hold that note and it'll ring out forever. You know, with an acoustic guitar, you don't quite have that luxury. With 5 musicians and 3 and 4 part vocal harmonies, you know, there's just this really earthy sense of music making that, you know, it's nothing processed. It's all immediate and coming from each individual and meshing together, and you know, in this moving, driving fashion. And so I think for me, that's one of my favorites, is when we all get going on a good jam and we're singing and the song's just really sounding good. You know, nobody's really looking at each other or, you know, necessarily talking, but we're all communicating through how we're playing and our parts coming in and out, and it's just really fun. So I'd say that's one of my favorite.
It's kind of the difference between art and what I called last week the industrial line music that you pretty much hear nowadays.
Definitely. You know, that's it. We're all trying to bring the most melodically out of our instrument and our voices and interact with each other at the same time.
It's the interactive process
Yeah.
that makes it unique. almost all of the styles of music, except maybe jazz.
We go from professional musician basically to very someone that's got families. We got people married, people not married, people with day jobs, people without day jobs. We got people with kids, people without kids. We have a range of ages. But I kind of forgot my point there. But
That's cool too. Yeah.
yeah, but
Well, how many albums do you guys have out now? Is it 3?
3.
two sort of studio albums. Then we have a live CD.
Yeah, the live over at the High and Dry, correct?
Yeah.
Well, I can honestly say in those last 3 years, I've definitely heard you guys mature as a band together.
Oh, that was my point. My point was with all this diversity among us, we our sort of baseline goal is no matter what else is going on with the band in our own lives, keep moving forward. Might be little steps.
Yeah.
We want to be a better, tighter live band. We want each CD to sound, to be better played and better. And if we just keep moving forward, we like what we're doing now. So if that's the worst it ever, Chris and I are always talking about it. It's like if this is the worst it ever gets, it's pretty good. So and if we just keep, if everything is better than the thing before, and that's our standard, it can't just be but more and more and more fun, and more people seem to know what we're doing. So. That's what we do. We hope that, Through the Sky, Rick helped us on that CD, and we know that, when Through the Sky was finally done, I'd been listening to it so much. I hadn't listened to the first CD in probably a year, and I finally popped it into my CD player, and it just shocked me how much better. We thought the first one was, pretty good. We recorded it in a cabin and did some post-production on it, and I knew the next one was better, but I didn't until I went back. I didn't realize how much better it sounded, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have fans that say they like the first one better, but I think it's unmistakably clear that Through the Sky is a better sounding album.
Oh yeah.
So.
Okay, and so tell our listeners where they can pick up and hear your music.
olymountainboys.com. I'm the unofficial web marketing guy for the band.
That's a very good website,
webs.
by the way. Who designed that for you guys?
It's
yeah,
a
it's laid
template
out
that
well.
comes from a company called Host Baby, which is associated with CD Baby, which is where we have our CDs available online for purchase.
So your last album was Through the Sky. Then you had Live at the High and Dry, and the first one was
It's called the Oly Mountain Boys.
Yeah.
okay. And
Self-titled.
do you sell all of those at your concerts, at your
Yep.
gigs?
All still in print.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
We're looking forward to selling out of one of them at some point.
Yeah, the first one.
We're getting close.
First one's getting closer, but we'll probably print some more.
We always hope our viewers become your new fans, so how can they contact you if that's the case?
The website's the best way, olymountainboys.com.
There's a direct email
contact.
link through the
Yeah.
site.
All right.
And of course, we're on Facebook and MySpace and all those platforms also.
And as far as shows, we regularly play at the McMenamin Spar Cafe in downtown Olympia on the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. It's a free show. They have a restaurant part. You can get alcohol there, but you can also bring your kids. It's from 8 to 11, absolutely free. Again, second and fourth Thursdays downtown. We play all kinds of places. Again, check the website, but that's a place you can usually count on seeing us.
And before we go, is there any last minute words of inspiration or future projects you want to make people aware of?
I believe there's a lot of good music out there that we're trying to put on, and others like us. Again, family friendly. It's a good community out there. If you haven't heard of it or found it yet, a lot of great music and a lot of great people that you can be involved with and see for little to no money, and it supports a great community. So get out there and check it out.
Yeah.
We're sorry Derek couldn't be here with us today, but Ty, Josh, Phil, Chris, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. It's great having you here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
And we're going to leave you with the title song off their new album, Through the Sky.
Years ago, and hand in hand, we had our lives completely planned. Our spirits danced, our souls became entwined. From Alaska to the Puget Sound, we were bound and love propelled us forward through the sky. And if trouble came, we didn't care. We hung suspended in the air and always seemed to land upon our feet. Held each other on a cloud, the music in my head so loud inside my chest, the sound of your heartbeat. Way again, you loved me, but you wanted to be free. Had to watch you drift away. There was nothing I could do or say. Left, and before you did, you carried me all the way down, all the way, all the way. Everything that we went through, I remember how we flew straight at the sun. Ran along right next to me, you held my hand, I felt so free. Your smile always soothing everyone. Later on when things went bad, we threw away the love we had. There wasn't any reason I could see. Bowed my head, began to cry, dropped me straight down through the sky, a journey that would finally carry me all the way down, all the way, all the way down, through the sky, to the ground.
Alright, and that music means it's calendar of events time. On January 27th, Traditions Cafe in Olympia will be having a concert featuring Back Porch Swing. Event starts at 7 p.m. Tickets are $23, $15 for low-income students, and can be purchased online at outofthewoods.org. February 5th, at the Minert Center in room 253 on 2011 Mottman Road, there's the Olympia Suite Adeline's Open House. Hear women's four-part harmony, get vocal lessons, and learn about performance competitions. Event is at 7 to 9. Call 360-438-1988 for details. On February 8th through the 10th, the Coach House at the State Capitol Museum is hosting The Creative Edge, an Olympia Spring Art Show and Sale. Show is at 6 to 9 p.m. Friday and 10 to 5 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. Call 360-264-4474 for details. And that's all of the events for this week.
We'd like to thank you for joining us today, and the same to all our listeners wherever you may be. This is Rick Nichols
And Matthew Warnick.
with OPS, wishing all of you a great week. We look forward to you joining us next week when our guest will be
Local area musician and vocalist extraordinaire, David Norman.
So until then, goodbye for now.
We'd love to hear from you, so contact us at olympicpeninsulaspotlight@gmail.com.